Morning. I'm Val Bryant, Vice Chair of North Herts District Council. It's an honour for me to be asked to welcome you all to our second Holocaust Memorial Day event. I would like to welcome all contributors, families, students, and those of you who represent different faith groups, plus those of you who are here to show your respect. I speak as someone born 9 years after the end of the Second World War. He was an historian with an interest in the 20th century history. I believe it is very important for all of us to continue to remember the Holocaust and the terrible impact it had on the Jewish people and the lessons that we have learnt and that we need to continue to heed. It feels especially poignant to be sat here delivering a speech in commemoration of the Holocaust via Zoom in the middle of a pandemic that so far has taken 2 million lives in this country, in the world. A consequence of contemporary disasters and tragic events is that they can help with the understanding and appreciation of the impact of disasters and tragedies in the world in the past. The devastation and the grief of families and loved ones over the many lives lost in the past year may provide added empathy and appreciation, especially, hopefully, from the younger generations, of the massive scale of the impact of much larger human tragedy of over 6 million lives lost in the Holocaust. This event today also provides us a reminder of the consequences of intolerance and discrimination against religious and ethnic minorities, including from the authoritarian and populist governments of powerful states such as China and Brazil. Also, of the dangers of denying the well-attested evidence of the past. I marvel at the continued high quality of historical research in the Second World War and the Holocaust, but the dismissals of evidence and the threat to expert knowledge and understanding from Holocaust deniers are deeply worrying and must be condemned and acted upon. I was heartened by a piece in the Jewish News that explained to me the key aim of the Holocaust education today is to encourage young people to speak out against any form of discrimination at the first signs. Again, welcome. Like you, I've come to reflect, empathise and learn. I'd like to hand over to Councillor Judy Billing. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome from me as well. My first enormous pleasure on this event is to introduce Rabbi Alan Garber to you, who joined us last year for our first event of this sort and was so compelling and so lovely that we're now trying to force him into the position of being our rabbi in residence. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you so much, everybody on this call. Thank you very much who's joining us live and watching probably the YouTube video later on. It's so special what we're doing now. I've got the opportunity to share with you some initial thoughts, and then we've got a very exciting program this morning from various different speakers. First, I would like to just reflect on last year and just to ponder. Before we came on the call, we were speaking with each other and we were thinking how we were together and the outside, and we joined in so much unity, so many positive messages, and it was such a wonderful springboard, which happened for the rest of the year. But unfortunately, as Councillor Val Bryant mentioned before, we have had a year which we never expected. And this year's theme for Holocaust Day, which is today, well, this is going to be our second for the local area, which we're doing. But nationally, the theme is Be the Light in the Darkness. Now, when I first heard this theme, I thought this was such a powerful idea, not just the idea in general, but also for where we are at the moment. Be a light in the darkness tells us that each one of us has the ability and the responsibility to be that light. And we'll be speaking about that and sharing that message today. in the Jewish community this year, we have unfortunately mourned the passing of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who was such a tremendous leader and a tremendous light himself, not just to the Jewish community, but to the world community, the many faith communities and people of no faith. He spoke with so much passion. I was reflecting on one of his essays when he was quoting Viktor Frankl, the famous psychologist who was a Holocaust survivor. And he gave this very strong message of being a light in the darkness, and the message from Viktor Frankl, the father of much of modern psychology, says that life is not what happens to us, it's how we perceive it. And seeing the light in the darkness is something we can all meditate on today, and seeing our situation that we have to, even in our struggles, be that light. If we can imagine a Holocaust survivor who went through the tremendous horrors, which we'll see and have reflections on shortly, could see that light, then also we need to have that strength as well. One of the things that we can take, which is a very powerful message, is that we are all in this together. The message which actually comes out of the biblical stories that the Jewish community are reading at the moment. We just finished reading about the plagues which happened in Egypt. There were 10 plagues, and the penultimate plague was the plague of darkness. And one of the commentators asked, why is it that this plague is the last plague? The previous plagues, a lot of the Egyptians were suffered death and destruction of their property, but in this plague of darkness, there was no destruction to the Egyptian people. They were just left in the dark for 6 days. And our commentaries say, no, it had to be the penultimate plague. Why? Because the plague of darkness was, even though they did not physically suffer, they didn't have any damage to their property, they were left alone. All the other plagues that they went to up to that point, they suffered together. But at this point, when they had the plague of darkness, they were left alone. And the plague of loneliness and feeling by ourselves is a tremendous, tremendous affliction. But we are coming together today, and we're saying we are not alone. We are coming together. We are in this together. We are marking our faith and our humanity together. The other reflection I want to share with you before I pass you on to the other speakers for this morning is that tomorrow we are in the Jewish community, we're actually celebrating a happy festival. It is called Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for trees. And you might think, why are Jewish people celebrating New Year for trees? If you look outside in my back garden, all the trees are bare and barren. You can't see anything on there. Why? Surely it'd be much better to celebrate the festival of the New Year for trees when in the summertime, in the autumn, where there's leaves are going beautiful colors. No. It's the New Year for trees at this time of year. Why is that? Because at this moment, the sap is about to start going up and the beginning of spring is going to come. Our message today, and I'm going to hear from the speakers, is seeing that light in the darkness. So remember that we are together in this. We see the positivity. I'm very excited today's program. We got a depth of speakers from the civic community and from the faith communities. I'm also particularly excited that we have Yankee Fachler, who is literally going to bring the story of the Holocaust very close to home. And he's going to be reflecting today on the history of Holocaust survivors and people who came to Letchworth Garden City just before and just after the Holocaust. So please enjoy the program. We'll have some time to reflect together at the end. And thank you again so much for joining us.
And now it's my very great pleasure to hand over to members of the North Herts Interfaith Forum for some of their reflections on this occasion.
As we recite this universal Hindu prayer from the Holy Scriptures, the Upanishads, we remember all those who have suffered and are suffering injustices. Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya Mrityoma Amritam Gamaya. Shanti, Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Peace to the body, mind, and spirit. We are guided to understand how atrocities and genocides grow in the darkness of ignorance. We, the Hindus, are no strangers to the suffering of innocent people, wherever they may be, for the history of medieval India has many documented examples of what one calls the Holocaust of the Hindus, which had persisted for some 800 years. Today, we all stand together in remembrance of all those who lost their lives at the hands of the Nazi regime and other genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, and Bosnia, to name a few. Let us together light the lamp of love within our hearts, filled with compassion and understanding, so that as embodiments of divine love, darkness can have no place. Being the light in the darkness comes from Satya, truth, Dharma, righteousness, Shanti, peace, Prema, divine love, and Ahimsa, non-violence, the essence of a Hindu way of life. If there is righteousness in the heart, there will be beauty in the character. If there is beauty in the character, there will be harmony in the home. If there is harmony in the home, there will be order in the nation. When there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. By the revered Guru, Satya Sai Baba. Let us now invoke peace by this traditional Vedic prayer. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Namaste.
Thank you to Daksha Trivedi from the Hindu community. I'm Chris Kell and I'm chair of the North Hearts Interfaith Forum. An interfaith group is there to reach across our belief systems, to find our common ground and to come together in understanding. Being the light in the darkness, I think, is a big ask for any of us. It's not just about finding the light out there in our belief systems, our gods, our gurus, our gifted leaders. It's about finding the light in ourselves. And some of us do that through prayer, meditation, mindfulness. Others do it through simple acts of generosity and love and being in tune with the world. But religious or non-religious, I think we've all had our share of knowing what light and darkness is this year. And it's been a bit of a teacher, I think. We've had to learn about the importance of community again. We've had to learn not to take people and things that we hold dear for granted. They won't necessarily be around forever. We've had to learn the importance of giving time and touch to people we love and those who are in need. A pandemic is by no means a Holocaust, but it has been a great teacher. So today, I hope that some of the words of those who participate from the faith communities will speak to you. And it was lovely hearing Daksha, who is a working woman and couldn't be with us and did her own recording. And we're moving on to Jenny Back, who is from the Quaker community. And finally, Father Tom O'Brien from the Roman Catholic community in North Hearts. And we'll finish with a moment of silence for us all. So over to Jenny.
Trying to be a light in the darkness has always resonated with me since I was a child. I remember singing, Jesus bids us shine like a pure, clear light, like a little candle burning in the night at my Sunday school. In my teens, an exploration of world religions other than Christianity led me to the conclusion that each at their most inspiring and in their central beliefs, was seeking to enlighten humanity and banish the darkness that we all have inside us and experience in the world. Coming to the Society of Friends, the Quakers, has cemented that feeling. So what does searching for the light and living in it mean to me? I try to live in love and empathy for my fellow human beings, both those whom I see every day and all people across the world. I try to make choices that enhance lives and care for our world, rather than ones that damage people and the natural world around us. Simple to express, but so hard to do. And I fail every day in many ways, I know. But if we all focus on that light that banishes the darkness, then I hope we can make sure that we never again see the horrors of the Holocaust repeated. We all need to be vigilant and keep our faces firmly turned to the light and away from the darkness. But I believe and hope we can. This has been a bleak year, and so many people have suffered and died during the pandemic. But I believe that, quoting from Quaker Faith and Practice, the sunlight shines through the cloud, even when the cloud is so thick that we cannot see the sun at all. Its rays carry on their healing work, and it does us good to be out in the open, even on a grey day. The experience of many of the greatest saints points to the traversing of the dark night of the soul before the light of full communion dawns. Holocaust Memorial Day gives us the opportunity to remember the worst atrocities that man can inflict on his fellow men, but at the same time to focus on living in ways that prevent any repetition of that terrible genocide. On this day, I pray that we will all find the strength to live in the firm hope of the eternal light.
So the light of hope. Hope is one of the most important keys to a better future. Listen to what some have said about hope. Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without the words and never stops at all. Desmond Tutu. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite the darkness. Augustine of Hippo. Hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see what they do not remain as they are, that they do not remain as they are. Helen Keller. Hope sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible. Francis of Assisi. Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. Where there is despair, may we bring hope. In remembering the Holocaust, we gather in the hope that nothing like that will ever happen again. For hope sees the possible in the impossible, sees the divine in the human, particularly in these difficult times of the pandemic. But most of all, hope helps us see the beauty, wonder, and miracle that we are. We stand together, sharing our hope for the future, and as a sign of hope and light to the world.
We'll now just take a moment to have a time of reflection and remembrance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, the members of the North Arts Interfaith Forum. I just want to tell you that the marvellous image that we were watching during that minute's silence was a picture submitted to us by Imogen Prosser, who's 10 years old, from King James Academy in Royston, and we thank her very much for sharing her artwork with us on this occasion. So now it's my enormous pleasure to introduce Yankee Fachler, the chair of the Jewish Historical Society of Ireland, who's going to share with us stories of Jewish families who came to Letchworth Garden City before and after the Second World War. And so it's over to Yankee.
Thanks, Judy. Rabbi Garber, representatives of the faith communities, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Both my parents were born in post-World War I Germany and were in their early teens when the Nazis came to power in Germany. Both my parents experienced a rapid descent into darkness as the Nazis decided that the Jews were non-people who first had to be forcibly excluded from society and later had to be completely eliminated from society. As teenagers, both my parents managed to escape the darkness when they arrived separately into the light of Britain. My mother was fortunate enough to escape together with her parents and her sister in August 1938. She was one of the lucky ones. My father was less fortunate. He and his sister arrived on the Kindertransport, which saw 10,000 unaccompanied children brought to the safety of Britain from German-occupied Europe. My father was sent to a farm boarding school in Scotland. My aunt, who as we speak in her 90s, is addressing a Holocaust Memorial Day event in Jerusalem, was taken in by a Christian family in Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire. When my father waved goodbye to his parents as the train left Berlin station in May 1939, he could not have imagined that he would never see them again. After sporadic communication with them via the Red Cross until mid-1942, they disappeared into the black hole we call the Holocaust. The Nazis murdered my grandparents, my father's uncles, aunts, cousins, and other family members. And to this day, we don't know where, when, or how my grandparents were murdered. Was it in the Lodz ghetto in Poland? Was it in the Treblinka death camp? Was it in the killing fields? Were they shot, gassed, or did they die of starvation? In the middle of the war, my mother's parents, who had moved from London to Stotfold, discovered a beacon of light in Letchworth, where they joined hundreds of Jewish families who had settled there in 1939 and 1940. My parents met when they were both doing agricultural war work, and when they stood under their wedding canopy in a field in Buckingham in December 1944, my father still had no way of knowing if his worst fears about the fate of his family were true. He was by now a soldier in the British Army and had started hearing reports of the scale of the genocide that the Nazis had brought upon the Jews. So the young newlyweds made a vow. As they prepared to set up home in Letchworth, they would be the light in the darkness. They would rebuild the Fachler tribe that in all likelihood had been extinguished. My arrival on the scene in January 1946 marked the start of the fulfillment of my parents' wedding day vow. And as the son of two Holocaust survivors, I proudly carry the label second generation Holocaust survivor. The tribe that my parents started includes 7 children born in Letchworth, 26 grandchildren, 120 great-grandchildren, and 5 great-great-grandchildren. And my mother, who died 2 years ago, lived to see her first great-great-grandchild. I can't help thinking that if my parents in Letchworth were able to start a dynasty that today already numbers over 150 direct descendants, how colossal is the loss of all the future generations that didn't get born because of the Holocaust. A couple of years ago, on a visit to Israel, I took my grandson for a day trip to Masada by the Dead Sea. As we descended the cable car, I asked a couple of American tourists where they were from. Far Rockaway, New York. And where are you from? They asked. I'm originally from a town called Letchworth in the UK. Letchworth? The American lady asked. I've just been reading about Holocaust survivors from Letchworth who helped keep the Jewish community going long after its sell-by date. I said, yes, that would be my parents. Amazingly, 50 years after the Letchworth Jewish community officially ceased to exist, its reach continues to extend across the world. I've often wondered what the effect was on the good citizens of Letchworth when 500 mainly Orthodox Jews fleeing from the London Blitz descended on the town in 1939 and 1940. In the 1930s, Cockney workers on their Sunday off took special day trips from King's Cross to gawp at Letchworth's implausible collection of citizens. John Betterman painted Letchworth people as earnest health freaks. George Orwell said the town attracted every fruit juice drinker, nudist, sandal wearer, nature cure quack, pacifist, and feminist in England. So I reckon that the arrival of the Jews in Letchworth was pretty seamless, one lot of odd people welcoming another group of odd people. The Jewish community gravitated towards the Abor estate, Hallway, Mulway, and Monklands, built by Abba Bornstein, and built a communal infrastructure typical of a much larger community. There were several synagogues and private homes, dozens of rabbis, teachers, and ritual slaughterers. There was a kosher butcher and a grocery store, a ritual bath, and several private after-hours Hebrew schools. At the end of the war, most of the Letchworth Jewish community returned to London, but not all. My parents were among several dozen families that remained for another 10 years or so when a small yeshiva, religious seminary for men, moved to Letchworth from Staines. An even smaller nucleus of Jewish families, again including my parents, remained in Letchworth between 1956 and 1971. My father was the last president of the community. Incidentally, Stephen Kirsch, the last remaining member of my parents' generation from Letchworth days, passed away earlier this month. He and his parents survived the Holocaust because his father was invited to open a glove factory near Letchworth a couple of years before the war. We had a Zoom memorial evening in Stephen's honor, and the two guest speakers at this Zoom memorial were both born and raised in Letchworth. The Zoom audience of 100 screens, that's about 150 people, was composed almost entirely of first, second, and third generation Letchworth people from all over the world. It is amazing how many of us Letchworth kids are still in contact, and how many of us are still infused with a special light that emanated from the town that continues to be a beacon that has guided us all our adult lives. When I addressed the Letchworth Garden City Society about 4 years ago on the topic of the Letchworth Jewish community, Stephen was one of 20 ex-Letchworth Jews who traveled from far and wide to hear me speak. Also attending the talk was my son, psychotherapist and writer, who flew in from Israel and visited Letchworth for the first time in his life. As we walked the streets, he must have absorbed something of that special Letchworth light. He turned to me and said, "When I write my next book and I need an ambience conducive to writing, I will come to Letchworth to do my writing." When I was growing up in Letchworth, we were blessed with the presence of two learned luminaries and world-class scholars. There was Rabbi Asher Feuchtwanger, who had been deported by the British during the war to Australia because he was considered an enemy alien. He served as our community rabbi. And there was his brother-in-law, Rabbi Solomon David Sassoon, the custodian of his father's famous Judaica collection, the world's greatest private collection of 1,000 years worth of priceless Torah scrolls, illuminated manuscripts, marriage certificates, and other priceless artifacts. In 1966, a renowned scholar visited the Sassoon Library in Letchworth. And in an article he later wrote, he said that when he was in the presence of these amazing artifacts, he was reminded of the episode of the burning bush, where God tells Moses, "Shal na'alecha mi'al raglecha," put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Obviously, this scholar had felt the light that emanated from Letchworth. I was fortunate to be personally mentored by both these rabbis. One of the unique features of Letchworth is that during the 60s and 70s, Jewish students from Cambridge University used to spend the weekends with my parents and the Sassoon family. One of those students, who was a frequent visitor in our home and in the Sassoon household, went on to become Chief Rabbi, the Lord Jonathan Sachs, who passed away recently. Many in my generation, lucky enough to have been raised in Letchworth, as well as many of these Cambridge students, were infused with the Letchworth light and went on to become illustrious rabbis, doctors, teachers, professors, and communal leaders. As a child, I mixed with people who had lost all or most of their families in the inferno, people who had lost husbands, wives, children, parents. Yet somehow they found healing in Letchworth. It says much about this cross-section of Jews, both English-born and refugees from Nazi Europe, both highly Orthodox and highly unorthodox, that they were able to create such a tightly knit and cohesive Jewish community in Letchworth. Growing up with so many families directly impacted by the Holocaust, it was perhaps inevitable that in later life I would become so involved in Holocaust Memorial. I conduct research, I write and I speak about the Holocaust, and for a dozen years I was the Master of Ceremonies at Ireland's National Holocaust Memorial Day in Dublin's Mansion House, which regularly attracted over 700 participants. A few years ago, I was part of a group of educators that visited Auschwitz. One of the group was an Israeli woman whose father had miraculously survived Auschwitz. At the entrance to the camp, she found herself immobilized with grief and unable to enter. After I helped to calm her, she shared something with me that has stayed with me ever since. My mother told me, she said, that in every family, there is someone in each generation that is the family's flame. That flame is dedicated to spreading light about our people's dark history. In my family, she said, I'm that flame. You, Yankee, are obviously the flame in your family. And indeed, with fewer and fewer eyewitnesses to the Holocaust still with us, I feel I owe it to my parents and my grandparents to be that flame. It is my duty as a second-generation Holocaust survivor to ensure that the world never forgets the attempt to eradicate the Jewish people. It's my duty to see that young people are educated about this monstrous crime. It is my duty to fight the criminal scourge of Holocaust denial. And as a proud son of the town that was a light in the darkness for so many Holocaust survivors, it is my duty to shine a light on the Letchworth Jewish community and on the welcoming people of Letchworth. And I thank you for this opportunity to be part of this important memorial event.
Thank you so very much, Yankee. That was marvellous to hear, and lots of stuff about the area that I live in that I actually knew nothing about at all. So thanks so much for coming and sharing that with us today. We're now going to see a short video made by Ivor Pearl BEM, who's a Holocaust survivor who was taken to Auschwitz at the age of 12.
Many of us learn about the terrible events of the Holocaust, but facts alone are not enough. It's so important to hear survivors' stories because they too speak for the millions of people who weren't permitted to tell theirs. Ivor Pearl is 82 and a survivor. In October 2014, I had the honour of meeting him and hearing about his life. He was born into a large family in Mokó, Hungary. Anti-Semitism affected Jewish people there for generations.
It was like an ongoing thing, and it was part of life. I mean, I had to go to school. I had to practically walk the gauntlet, running the gauntlet. I mean, the last thing you did is go back home and tell your parents. And the police were the one who were causing all the problems.
The country was invaded in 1944, and they were forced to leave their home. Moved from ghetto to train and train to camp, the family were pushed apart.
Do you know what it depended, our life depended on? Instant decisions like that, choosing which way to go. I went to one of the groups, my brother went to another group, and my father went to a third group. And I've never seen my father since.
Ivor experienced the terrible conditions of Auschwitz and Dachau.
Out of my family, I told you there were 9 of us, 9 children, and two of my mother and father. There's only me and my brother survived. He saved me from the jaws of death, literally 3 times, definitely.
Trapped in the children's barracks where he sheltered from an air raid siren, Ivor was rescued by his brother Alec.
He said, come on, Ivor, you got to come out from there. I said, no, I can't, I'm scared. They found out that he tried to escape or something, you're going to be punished bad. I was literally scared. I said, no, come on, you must come out with me. And eventually he took me out. The following morning he woke up and the whole children's block was empty. All the children taken to the gas chamber.
Some things are too cruel to comprehend. He helped him escape the camp hospital, a dreadful place where he was ill with typhus. There was no proper treatment, and had he remained, there was little hope of recovery.
If he wouldn't have been there to help me out, I wouldn't have been, obviously, with me alive.
Ivor was 12 and a half at the time.
When I saw my granddaughter, you know what the bat mitzvah is?
Yeah.
Well, she was celebrating the bat mitzvah, she was 12 years old. I said, you know something, I was 12, that was the age I was when I was taken to Auschwitz.
In March 1944, there were 700,000 Jews in Hungary, and within 4 months, over half were killed.
Because, I mean, the figures that you're talking about are so enormous, are so horrendous, that it's very hard to comprehend.
One of the most frightening things is the terrible disconnect between the orders being given and the lives they affected.
Have you heard of the Wannsee Agreement? And that's when they got together, a meeting like we have here with cakes and tea, discussing how to dispose of people. What I keep saying is, I fear people more than God. That a day does not go by without some association that happens, whatever it is, of my background. But fortunately, I don't look upon it. Well, I just live.
After the war ended in 1945, Ivor and his brother emigrated to England.
I've had 2 very, very lucky experiences in my life. Number 1, to have survived the Holocaust, and number 2, to have chosen England to be my country. Not only did I feel safe, I felt very, very elated. Honest and truly, I felt I've arrived in heaven.
After arriving in England, Ivor built a life for himself.
I had my own business before I could even read or write or speak English. As soon as we can stand and walk, you have to go start earning a living.
Ivor has 4 children and 6 grandchildren. His home is filled with family photographs. He has given talks at schools and religious centres about his experiences, but it took years before he was able to talk about the Holocaust, even with his own family.
My wife saying to me that, you know, Ivor, why don't you do something? I managed to get a computer. Said, sit down and sort of tell your story to your children, because I never spoke about it to my children.
He documented his story for them, and it has now reached many other people and touched their lives. Talking about it can be painful, provoking questions that can't be answered.
What has it helped? What has the world learned since 1945? How would I behave if I would have been the Gentile? 1 week we should be friends playing with us, and the second week they were herding us into a ghetto.
Although, as Ivor says, there will never be another Holocaust, conflict and cruelty continue to happen, and remembrance is so important.
All I can do is talk about the experience, what happened, and to tell whoever wants to listen what happens to people who follow that route. And it's like somebody said, you know what, even if there's only one person who has heard either me or somebody else's story and makes a difference, I mean, that alone would be worse to have spoken about it.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is not to sort of answer hate with hate. It's happened, it's happening, and possibly the human spirit will survive, I hope.
Thank you so much. That was a marvellous video clip to share. And I'm still reeling slightly from some of the things that Yankee told us a few minutes ago, because I still can't believe how little I know about the place I live in, having been here for nearly 50 years. But let's move on. And now we're going to share with you a couple of poems which have been submitted to us as part of today's event by young people who wanted to join with us. The first poem is by Seren Prosser, age 13, for whom I think we have a clip of the poem.
Be the candle that guides others, strike the match to light the fire. Be a beam of sunlight shining into a dark and lonely cave. Do not fear the darkness, for without the night, would we ever see the stars or the moon? If everyone around you is wrong, be right. If everyone around you is alone, be their light.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing that with us. Our second poem is by Shruti Satpathy, who's age 14 but can't be with us or share a clip today. So we're going to have our first contribution from our poet in residence, John Gahori, who's going to read Shruti's poem for us. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Judy. This is Shruti's poem. It's called Be the Light in the Darkness. The dark is looming. The last traces of hope are gone. There is chaos in the mind and a serene submission. The families are huddling together to spend a last moment together before everything goes black. Is this the end? Is the question on each one's mind. In such despair, be the light. When there is inconsolable silence, be the light. Even when the darkness wins, be the light. Light a match to reawaken hope. Several matches will follow. Then light a candle. The despair goes. From the candle, light a cresset. The path will show and the darkness goes. Remember, the sun lights up the moon, and the moon lights up the nights. Light is contagious. Once you glow, more will follow. Like the night is never completely dark, just one star blows away the darkness. The sin is never dark enough, just one flicker of hope blows it away. So up now, O sweet child of mine. Dawn is setting, the umbra is over, the clouds are lined with silver. That was Shruti Satpathy's poem.
Thank you so much, John, for reading us Shruti's poem. I introduced Rabbi Garber earlier today as our rabbi in residence, a role he is not going to be allowed to escape. But now coming back to you, John, also I believe a resident of North Harts for nearly 50 years. You, of course, are known as the poet in residence at David's Bookshop, Letchworth, but have also carved out a role for yourself as our Holocaust Memorial Day poet in residence, and I think you're going to read us your new poem for today's event called The Beast in the Maze. So over to you.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, my poem, I think all poems, the poems we've heard so far, and in fact all the contributions we've heard so far, have all been candles in the darkness. This is my particular candle. It's called The Beast in the Maze. We'll only be safe, they said, when a hero can enter the maze, run the beast through the heart and find his way out again. The golden age will return, or failing that, years of safety. The myths talk of a hero who marked his way through the maze with a spider's thread, slaughtered the beast, and emerged to his welcome to civic rejoicing. They say afterwards, all was well. But the fact is, it's still there. That's the lesson of history. Its lair is the human heart, a reeking, malevolent space breeding atrocity, terror, the rubrics of ethnic cleansing. Loved by those hating other, it sends those who oppose them to the camps, to the gas chambers. It feeds on its victims, innocents like ourselves, gorged to force feed a warped view of social order. Let hero and heroine today greet other with xenophile hearts, and free of hatred or prejudice, live only by acts of kindness, acceptance, warmth, generosity. We must slaughter the beast in the maze.
Thank you, John, and I'm increasingly moved by all the contributions that I've heard this morning. I'd just like to add maybe just a few words of my own now, which isn't easy to do, but I'm determined. Because I was born 6 years after the Holocaust. I was born in London, in Paddington, because my father was a refugee from Hitler's Berlin, and my mother's family had fled the pogroms in Poland a generation earlier. Yankee talking about people being interned for being enemy aliens reminded me that my grandfather was interned in the Isle of Man as an enemy alien, and my father nearly was, only he escaped when they came to get him, which was an unusually intrepid thing for my dad to do, but he did it, and I didn't know him then, so I didn't know what he was capable of. I thought I had been born into the light after the darkness, because history can be a week before you were born or hundreds of years before you were born. The only difference is whether you're told about it by your relatives or you read about it in a book. It's still forever ago, even if it was only 6 years before. And it becomes very real if it's told to you by your parents and your grandparents who survive. And if your parents, friends, have tattooed numbers on their arms that you have to come to understand what they're about as well. And that was a strong feature of my childhood. But then I discovered that there was and still is a world of racial hatred, which leads to small acts of loathsome violence or genocide on a grand scale. In China today, there is evidence of appalling genocide against the Uyghur Muslims, and we must not turn our backs on that tragedy that's unfolding before us. I confess, I genuinely don't understand it in any of its manifestations. I really don't. There were 20th century genocides and hatreds before and after I was born, and there are now 21st century genocides and hatreds in plain and dreadful sight. Sometimes its acceptability seems to have got worse. Donald Trump incited violence and white supremacism and argued that black people's votes didn't matter. They didn't count. So have we actually moved at all? Hopefully the United States has, but that still remains to be seen. We all have to be the light in the darkness, and we have to be vigilant about it every day of our lives. Holocaust Memorial Day enables us to contemplate this both publicly and privately, and stands together against anti-Semitism wherever we see it, and call out all forms of racism wherever we see them. And I'm privileged to join with you all and be able to say this both to myself and out loud. And now I'm going to ask Rabbi Alan Garber to finish today's event for us, but in the full memory knowledge and realization that he'll be back with us next year.
Okay, Judy, thank you so much, and thank you very much everybody again for joining us this morning. It's been a real roller coaster of emotions. The theme we have, and we're going to continue with, is the being the light in the darkness. And ladies and gentlemen, those who are watching it now, those who are watching it on YouTube later on, we have been living and experiencing that now. We've been practicing that now. How much love and how much light have we brought in, sharing, just coming together. Last year, as I started off the reflection, we were physically together. And maybe this year, because of technology, we can increase that light and the powerful message. Anybody watching this today stands as witness to what humanity can be. And out of the darkness, which have been reflected on through poems, through history, through messages of faith, we can see that we can live and experience light. And that message comes to us this year even more so, as many of the speakers reflected on, that we need to be there for each other. We need to share each other's humanity. We can learn from each other. We can love and respect each other, whoever we are. And getting to know each other, we individually become better and stronger people. I'd like to say a few thank yous, and I'd like to finish off with a prayer and then a call for action. So first of all, some thank yous. I'd like to thank the councillors who have joined us this morning, and in their leadership, as Yankee reflected, of this very special place of Letchworth Garden City and the surrounding area. We want to thank you for your leadership and bringing us together today. I would like to thank Councillor Julie Billing for helping us through all the different transitions to the different speakers that we've had this morning. I'd like to thank Chris Kell and all the North Hearts Interfaith Forum, the children involved in the art project, and particular Imogen Prosser, who we saw, and as we were reflecting on our minute silence, we saw this beautiful image. This has been this experience has been in the ears and the eyes has been an amazing experience. And Imogen's picture was very, very, very powerful. I would also like to thank very much our guest speaker, Mr. Yankee Fachler, for enlightening us and in such an eloquent way to the history and the light of Letchworth Garden City. And I think on behalf of Yankee, myself, and all the Jewish people, we would like to thank the local community for welcoming us those years ago, and in general the British community and its tolerance and its direction to move toward this light that we can live together in love and respect. I'd also like to thank to John Gohori for his reading his poem and the poem of Suruti, and also the video we had of Sarah and the very, very powerful poems that we had. Finally, I'd like to thank Lee Ellis, who is the Community Liaison Officer, and a predecessor, Katie Stadden, for bringing us all together and making this happen. So let me share a prayer with you, which hopefully will bring our reflection together. And the prayer is as follows. I know it's going to be shared on the screen. It says as follows: "A loving God, we come to you with heavy hearts, remembering the 6 million Jewish souls murdered during the Holocaust. In the horrors of that history, when so many groups were targeted because of their identity, and in genocides which followed, we recognize destructive prejudices that drive people apart. Forgive us when we give space to fear, negativity, and hatred of others simply because they are different from us. In the light of God, we see everyone as equally precious manifestations of the divine, and can know the courage to face the darkness. Through our prayers and actions, help us to stand together with those who are suffering, so that light may banish all darkness, love will prevail over hate, and good will triumph over evil. Amen." Just to finish off and to share with you that one of my roles is also as a hospital chaplain, which I do actually in the hospital which I was born in, Northwick Park Hospital in Harrow. And it has been a particularly challenging time, as we know, for the NHS. And I've had first-hand experience of being in there and seeing patients. There is a poster which has been put up there. I saw it last week, and it just filled me with so much warmth. It was a poster up on the wall in the hospital, and it said, "#1 rule, be kind to others." Be kind to others. And you know, we've had so many rules and regulations through COVID-19, but I think if we can take the message of that poster, that's something we can all do in our little way, whether it's a smile, and even behind a mask, if we're out in public, we can still smile at each other, acknowledge each other, and be kind to each other. Before I came on this call this morning, I had a phone call to Australia. We used to live in Australia just over 7 years ago, and one of the members of the community we involved in there in Sydney was a Holocaust survivor who just marked her 100th birthday, Mimi Joseph. And I had the fortune to speak to her this morning. I'm telling her I was coming on this call and I'll be speaking to many people of different faiths in the Letchworth community. And I asked her, what message can she share? And again, she gave this idea that we need to be kind to each other. She said, please ask them to be kind to the Jews, but also be kind to everyone that we meet. Please do that. And she said it with such emotion and passion. And I told her I would do that. So today, we should let today be a springboard for action as we say goodbye to each other and go back to our families and communities. Let's take the messages and the inspiration that we heard today forward in our thoughts and our words and our action. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alan. That was absolutely lovely. Thank you to everybody who's taken part in this event, who's helped us put together this event, and who's joined us on the YouTube channel to watch this event. Some quite lovely things have come out of the pandemic in a weird sort of way. And being able to work together in this way is not entirely bad, and maybe something that we want to think about using the best of when we don't have to anymore and we are able to meet together and work together and be close, and of course to be kind. And I think I will just close this event by referring back to what Alan just said, which is be kind to the Jews, but be kind to everybody else as well. Thank you so much, Alan, and thank you absolutely everybody for your participation. And bye-bye.